What happens when a new mother laughs at her best friend's joke about their newborn looking like him, only to discover her husband had been recording the entire conversation? I convinced myself it was just harmless banter between old friends, that my husband's sudden silence was him being paranoid, and that demanding a DNA test meant he didn't trust me. Then, at the pediatrician's office during our baby's 2-month checkup, surrounded by other families, a court officer handed me a custody petition with paternity test results, and I realized the man I'd been calling controlling had spent 8 weeks proving our son wasn't biologically his, except he was. The DNA test proved Owen was Theo's father, but by then, it didn't matter. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories, because I had spent 8 weeks laughing at jokes that made my husband question his own son. And a judge decided that kind of emotional abuse was reason enough to take my baby away. My name is Calista Mercer. Everyone calls me Calla. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a graphic designer at Highland Creative Agency. I have a husband named Owen, who is 34, and we have a son named Theo, who is 2 months old. Or we had a son together. Now Owen has primary custody, and I get supervised visits twice a week, and it's all because I wouldn't stop laughing at my best friend's jokes. This is the story of how I destroyed my family without ever cheating. This is the story of how I convinced myself that boundaries didn't matter as long as I knew the truth. And this is the story of how the man I called paranoid turned out to be the only one thinking clearly. It started 6 weeks after Theo was born. Or maybe it started before that. Maybe it started during my pregnancy when Noel's visits became more frequent, when our coffee dates turned into weekly occurrences, when I stopped mentioning to Owen how much time Noel and I spent together. But the moment everything truly fell apart was 6 weeks postpartum, on a Tuesday evening. Owen came home from work to find Noel sitting on our couch, holding Theo. I was in the kitchen making tea. We'd been talking about a design project Noel was working on. He's a photographer and creative director, and we often collaborate on ideas. Noel looked down at Theo and said, "You know, he really does have my eyes." I laughed. "Stop it. You say that every time you see him." Noel grinned. "I'm serious, though. Look at this face. He could be mine." I laughed again. "You're ridiculous." Owen had walked in during this exchange. I didn't notice at first. When I turned around, he was standing in the doorway with his work bag still on his shoulder. His face was completely blank. Noel saw him and quickly said, "Hey man, just admiring your kid. He's a handsome little guy." Owen didn't respond. He just set down his bag and went upstairs. Noel left about 15 minutes later. I thought everything was fine. That night, after I'd put Theo down in his nursery, Owen asked me to come talk to him. He asked me to explain why Noel had said Theo had his eyes. I laughed nervously. He was just being silly. You know how Noel is. He makes random jokes all the time. Owen asked if I thought it was appropriate for my male best friend to joke about our baby looking like him. I felt defensive immediately. I told him he was being insecure, that platonic friendships between men and women existed, that he couldn't expect me to cut off my best friend from college just because he was male. Owen pulled out his phone. He showed me text messages from 3 different family members asking if everything was okay. One was from his friend Trevor, saying he'd found Noel's comment weird when they'd met at our house last week. I told Owen that people were bored and looking for drama where there was none. Owen asked how often Noel visited. I said a few times a week, that he'd been really supportive during my maternity leave, that I needed adult conversation while Owen was at work all day. Owen asked if I thought 3 or 4 visits a week was excessive for a male friend when I had a newborn. I told him he was gatekeeping my friendships, that I couldn't believe he was being this controlling. He didn't say anything else. He just went back to the nursery. I went to bed angry and convinced that Owen was being irrational. The next day at work, my first week back from maternity leave, I texted Noel. Owen is being so jealous about your joke yesterday. I can't believe he's making this into a thing. Noel responded quickly. He always was a bit uptight. You deserve supportive friends, especially right now. Gemma, my team lead at the agency, saw me smiling at my phone. She leaned over and asked if that was the hot photographer friend I'd mentioned. I said yes, and that Owen was being ridiculous about our friendship. Gemma laughed and said that some husbands couldn't handle their wives having male friends. Our creative director, Harold, walked past at that exact moment. He paused, made eye contact with me, and continued walking without saying anything. I felt a flicker of unease, but I pushed it away. That evening when I got home, Owen was in the nursery staring at Theo's crib. His laptop was open on the changing table. I could see a folder structure on the screen. Dated folders, photo files, documents. A calendar reminder popped up on his screen. Downtown 12:40. I asked him what he was working on. He closed the laptop immediately and said he was just organizing family photos. I noticed a labeled folder on the dresser. It said, Medical Records, Theo, in Owen's precise handwriting. I asked him why he needed to organize Theo's medical records. The baby was only 6 weeks old. He said it was important to have documentation, that he wanted everything organized properly. His phone lit up on the dresser, a call coming in with no caller ID. He dismissed it without answering. Then he did something that made my stomach turn. He locked the nursery door from the outside as we left the room. I asked him why he was locking it. We never locked the nursery. He said he wanted to make sure things stayed organized in there. That night, I lay awake in bed, feeling a growing sense of dread that I couldn't quite name. A week later, Owen sat me down in the kitchen one morning. Theo was napping in his bassinet nearby. Owen asked me to explain the timeline of when Noel and I became so close. I told him we'd been friends since college. He knew this. We'd been at each other's weddings. Owen said he understood that, but he wanted to know when the friendship intensified. I didn't like where this was going. I said we'd always been close. Owen opened his laptop. He showed me something that made my blood run cold. It was a timeline, printed photos from my phone, arranged chronologically. Pictures of Noel and me having lunch, getting coffee, at a gallery opening, on a weekend photography trip when I was 7 months pregnant. The dates were listed under each photo. 1 lunch date per week during my 2nd trimester. Multiple evening creative consultations. That photography workshop weekend. I told Owen I needed creative inspiration during pregnancy, that he was always working late and I needed social interaction. Owen scrolled to another page. Screenshots of text messages between Noel and me. Can't wait to see you today. You always make me laugh when I need it most. Owen doesn't understand creative people like we do. I felt my face burning. I asked Owen how he got those messages. He said I'd left my phone unlocked on the nightstand a few nights ago. He'd taken screenshots of the relevant conversations. I told him that was a violation of my privacy. He said that documenting evidence of inappropriate emotional intimacy wasn't a violation. It was due diligence. I asked him what he meant by evidence. He said he meant proof of a pattern that started during my pregnancy and escalated after Theo's birth. Then he showed me something else. It was a hospital photo, from the day Theo was born. The memory came flooding back and I felt sick. Owen reminded me of what happened that day. He asked me if I remembered Noel visiting the recovery room. I did remember. Barely. I'd been exhausted and medicated. Owen pulled up photos from his phone. Noel holding baby Theo. Noel smiling at the camera, and timestamp notes beneath each one. He played an audio recording. His phone had been recording when he left to get coffee. I heard Noel's voice. Look at those eyes, he could be mine. Then my own voice, laughing weakly. "Stop, you're crazy." Noel again. "Seriously though, he has my nose, don't you think? I'm just saying if I didn't know better." The recording cut off there. That was when Owen had returned. I told Owen that I was medicated and exhausted, that I barely remembered that conversation. Owen said he remembered it perfectly, because that was the moment he started questioning whether his son was actually his son. He said his mother Judith had been there too. She'd walked in right as Noel was making those comments. She'd heard everything. I told Owen he was taking a stupid joke way too seriously. He opened a folder on the kitchen table. Inside were hospital photos, printed text messages, and a page of handwritten notes dated from the day of Theo's birth. There was also a contact on his phone that he showed me. It had been renamed with a briefcase emoji. The text thread was labeled Documentation Timeline. I asked him who that was. He said it was someone helping him understand his options. I asked if it was a lawyer. He said I'd find out when it was appropriate. That afternoon, Owen's mother Judith called. She asked if she could come for Sunday lunch with both families. She said it was important to address some concerns. My mother Marion texted right after, confirming she and my father Frank would be there too. I felt like I was being ambushed. That night, I heard Owen in his home office. I pressed my ear to the door. He was on the phone, speaking in that measured, professional tone he used for work meetings. He said, "Yes, I have the hospital records. Multiple witnesses heard the initial comments. The pattern of inappropriate behavior is well documented. I need to understand the legal process for paternity establishment and custody protection in case the results confirm my concerns." There was a pause. Then, "I understand it's unusual to request testing when you're married, but given the circumstances and the ongoing inappropriate comments, I need certainty, for my own peace of mind and for any legal proceedings that may follow." I heard a printer start running. It was after 11 at night. I went back to the bedroom and lay awake, finally understanding that Owen wasn't just upset. He was building a case, and I had given him all the evidence he needed. Sunday lunch was a nightmare. We met at Toscano's, an Italian restaurant with a private dining room. Both of our families were there. My parents, Frank and Marion, my younger sister Iris, Owen's mother Judith, Owen's uncle and aunt. I arrived on time. Owen arrived separately, carrying Theo in his car seat. And then I did something unforgivably stupid. I brought Noel. I had texted him that morning saying we were having family lunch, and he was welcome to join since he was basically family. He'd seemed hesitant, but I'd insisted. When we walked in together, I saw my father's face change. Judith set down her water glass. Iris looked at me like I'd lost my mind. The lunch was tense from the beginning. People made awkward small talk. Owen sat at the far end of the table with Theo's car seat beside him. Halfway through the meal, Theo started fussing. Before Owen could pick him up, Noel reached over. He said, "Come to Uncle Noel, little guy." "We have a special bond, don't we?" I laughed. "He does seem to calm down for you." Noel picked up Theo and addressed the whole table. "Seriously, though, this kid could be my mini-me. Look at this hair pattern. It's exactly like mine was as a baby." He pulled out his phone and showed everyone baby pictures of himself. I looked at the photos and said, "Oh my God, that is similar." I was still laughing, still thinking it was all in good fun. Judith stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor. She said she needed air. She kissed Theo's forehead and walked out of the restaurant. Owen followed her immediately. My father Frank leaned across the table and said, "Noel needs to leave. Now." I was shocked. I said Frank was being rude to my friend. Frank said that Noel's behavior was inappropriate and I was enabling it. That I was humiliating my husband in front of both families. Noel stood up, suddenly uncomfortable. He said maybe he should go. He left quickly. After he was gone, Iris pulled me aside. She said that Noel's behavior was completely inappropriate, that I was either incredibly naive or deliberately complicit. I told her she didn't understand our friendship. She said she understood boundary violations just fine, that she worked in family services, and she'd seen situations like this before. She said I was destroying my marriage. I told her everyone was overreacting. She said I was in denial. The lunch ended early. Everyone left without saying much. Owen took Theo and drove away separately. 2 days later, I was at the supermarket. I was in the checkout line when I heard someone behind me say my name. It was a woman I recognized from my prenatal yoga class. She was talking to her friend, loud enough for me to hear. She said, "That's the woman whose best friend keeps joking about being the baby's father." So awkward. I heard the husband is getting a DNA test. Every person in line turned to look at me. I left my groceries on the conveyor belt and walked out. That evening, Judith came to our house. She said she wanted to help with the baby, but I could tell she had another agenda. After I put Theo down for the night, Judith found me in the living room. She asked me directly, "Does Owen have reason to doubt that he's Theo's biological father?" I was so shocked I couldn't speak at first. Then I was furious. I asked her how she could ask me that. She said, "Because I was there in the hospital recovery room. I heard what Noel said. I heard you laugh instead of shutting it down. And I've watched this pattern continue for 8 weeks. I told her she was making something out of nothing, that Noel was just my friend, and his jokes didn't mean anything." Judith said, "When my son gets the DNA test results, we'll all know the truth. But whether or not Theo is his biologically, you've done damage that can't be undone. You've made him doubt his own son." Then she left. I stood in the living room, finally feeling the full weight of what I'd done. But it still wasn't enough to make me change. The next Saturday, my sister Iris texted asking me to meet her at the park playground near our house. It was cold and windy. Not the kind of day you'd choose for a casual walk. Iris was waiting by the walking path. She didn't hug me when I arrived. She said she was worried about my marriage and my relationship with Noel. I told her there was nothing inappropriate happening, that everyone was reading into innocent comments. Iris said that Noel's repeated jokes about Theo looking like him were crossing serious boundaries, that whether I realized it or not, I was participating in something harmful. I told her she was overanalyzing, that Noel was just being friendly. Iris said, "Calla, I work in family services. I've seen situations like this before. Maybe nothing physical happened between you and Noel, but the emotional intimacy is damaging your marriage. And more importantly, you've created genuine doubt about your son's paternity." I said Owen should trust me. Iris said, "Trust requires trustworthy behavior. And your behavior, laughing at those jokes, bringing Noel to family events, defending him instead of shutting down inappropriate comments, that's not trustworthy behavior." She gave me an ultimatum: set clear boundaries with Noel, apologize to Owen sincerely, get marriage counseling, or she would support Owen in whatever legal steps he decided to take. I told her she was betraying me, her own sister. She said, "No, Calla, you're betraying yourself and your family, and you're too stubborn to see it." Then she walked away. That evening, Judith came to the house again. She said she was there to help with Theo, but I knew better. After I put the baby down, Judith confronted me in the living room archway. She asked me point blank, "Did you have an affair with Noel?" I was outraged. I told her absolutely not, that the suggestion was insulting. She said, "Then why have you allowed him to make everyone think you did? Why do you laugh at jokes that make your husband question his own child?" I told her she was making too much of silly comments. Judith said, "I was in that recovery room, Calla. I heard Noel say he could be mine. I heard him say Theo had his nose. I watched you laugh instead of telling him to stop. And I've watched this continue for 2 months." She said, "When Owen gets those DNA test results, you better pray they show what you claim. Because if they don't, you'll lose everything. And if they do show Owen is the father, you'll still lose everything, because you've put him through hell for no reason." Then she told me that she'd already given a statement to someone. She wouldn't say who. Monday morning, I received an email from Harold, my boss at the agency. He wanted to meet at 9 a.m. The subject line said, "Workplace relationships and professional boundaries." Gemma texted me right after. "Noel's been telling people at networking events that Theo looks like him." Someone sent Harold screenshots of social media posts. "Calla, this is bad." I felt sick. That evening, Owen came home late. He was carrying a leather document folder I'd never seen before. I confronted him about talking to his mother about paternity. He said he hadn't discussed it with anyone outside of professional consultants. I asked him what professional consultants. He said, "People who help with documentation and legal procedures." I saw his laptop open on the kitchen table. Browser tabs were visible. Court-ordered paternity test procedures, custody pending DNA results, fraud in marriage, genetic parentage. I asked him if he was really doing this, if he was really going to destroy our family over some stupid jokes. He said, "I'm not destroying anything. I'm finding out the truth and protecting myself and Theo accordingly." Then he went to his office and closed the door. I stood in the hallway, finally understanding that I had pushed Owen past some invisible line, and there was no going back. Tuesday at lunch, I met Noel at the coffee shop near my office. I needed to talk to him, to make sense of everything that was happening. I told him about the family pressure, about Owen's suspicions and the DNA test, about everyone treating us like we'd done something wrong. Noel said I was reading too much into his jokes, that he was just being friendly and people were overreacting. I said that people were treating us like we'd had an affair. Noel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He said, "Look, maybe we should take a break from hanging out. Owen seems kind of unstable, and I don't want to be in the middle of your marriage drama." I felt like I'd been slapped. I said, "You're the one who kept making those jokes. You're the one who said Theo looked like you." Noel said, "You're the one who laughed. You're the one who let Owen think I was serious. I was just joking around, and you made it into this whole thing." Then he said he had to go. He left me sitting alone in the coffee shop. I sat there for 20 minutes, realizing that Noel was protecting himself. He was distancing himself from the consequences of his own behavior. I had destroyed my marriage, defending a friendship that evaporated the moment there was real pressure. That evening, I tried to talk to Owen. I told him I was willing to set boundaries with Noel, that I understood now that the jokes had gone too far. Owen said it was too late for boundaries. I asked him what he meant. He said, "The legal process is already in motion." I asked if he was filing for divorce. He said, "I'm filing for clarity, paternity testing, custody arrangements, financial protection, everything that needs to be established." I asked if he really doubted that Theo was his son. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Exhausted, hurt, done. He said, "Your behavior has made doubt reasonable. That's the problem. Not whether I believe you, but whether your behavior justifies my doubt." I saw file boxes in his office, labels with dates, a spreadsheet on his laptop showing columns, date, witness, comment, location. A cloud sync notification popped up. File uploaded, medical, genetic. A calendar reminder, downtown, 16:15. I asked him what all of this was. He said, "Documentation, everything I need for court proceedings." I told him he was being crazy. He said, "No, Calla, I'm being careful. There's a difference." Then he told me he was taking Theo to stay with his mother for the weekend, that Theo needed a stable environment. He packed a bag and left with our son. I was alone in the house, finally understanding the full scope of what I'd done. The next morning, I parked in the garage under my office building. As I was walking to the elevator, I saw Owen's car. I walked over to it. Through the windows, I could see the back seat, file boxes, printed photographs, text message screenshots, hospital records, and a sealed envelope labeled lab authorization. His phone was on the passenger seat. A contact renamed with a gavel emoji was visible on the screen. A text message preview showed, "Petition ready, test scheduled Thursday." My hand started shaking. That afternoon, Owen called me. He said I should prepare for formal legal proceedings regarding paternity and custody. I asked if he was threatening me. He said, "I'm informing you. The DNA test will settle the paternity question. The custody arrangements will protect Theo regardless of the outcome." I asked what he meant by regardless of the outcome. He said, "Whether or not I'm Theo's biological father, your behavior has demonstrated poor judgment and created an environment harmful to our child. That will be addressed legally." Then he said, "You should get a lawyer, Calla. This is happening." He hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone, finally understanding that Owen had been planning this for weeks. All those folders, all that documentation, all those appointments downtown. He'd been building a case, and I'd given him everything he needed. I looked at the calendar on my desk. 5 days until the circled date. 5 days until my entire life fell apart. Thursday afternoon, Theo's 2-month checkup. I arrived at Dr. Patterson's office at 2:30 p.m. The waiting room was moderately crowded. Several mothers with infants, one father reading to a toddler, a pregnant woman filling out forms. I checked in at the front desk and sat down with Theo in his car seat. I was filling out the milestone questionnaire when I saw someone approaching, a man in a grey suit. He was holding a manila envelope. He stopped in front of me and asked, "Are you Calista Mercer?" I said yes. He said, "You've been served," and handed me the envelope. Then he walked away. Every person in the waiting room was staring at me. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The first document said, "Petition for custody modification." Below that was another document, DNA test results. I read the results first, barely able to focus on the words. Alleged father, Owen James Mercer. Child, Theodore Owen Mercer. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Conclusion. Owen James Mercer is the biological father of Theodore Owen Mercer. I felt a wave of relief, then confusion. If Owen was the father, why was I being served custody papers? I kept reading. Petition for custody. Modification. Despite biological paternity being confirmed, petitioner seeks primary physical custody based on respondent's pattern of emotional abuse, boundary violations, and deliberate creation of paternity doubt that caused severe emotional distress and created an unstable environment for the minor child. I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring. The petition detailed everything. Respondent knowingly allowed and encouraged inappropriate relationship with male friend Noel Ashford. Respondent repeatedly laughed at and enabled jokes, suggesting alternative paternity. Respondent brought Noel Ashford to family events, despite multiple family members expressing concern. Respondent refused to set appropriate boundaries, despite multiple requests. Respondent's behavior created hostile environment, causing petitioner severe emotional distress. Pattern demonstrates poor judgment and disregard for child's best interests. Respondent's conduct constitutes emotional abuse under state domestic relations law. Exhibit list. 52 items. I scrolled through with numb fingers. Hospital witness statements from 2 nurses who heard Noel's comments. Sworn statement from Judith Mercer describing recovery room incident. Photos of Noel holding Theo with timestamps. Text messages between respondent and Noel showing inappropriate emotional intimacy. Screenshots of respondent's texts calling petitioner jealous and paranoid. Restaurant receipt from family lunch with witness statements. Screenshots of Noel's social media posts joking about Theo resembling him. Professional assessment from family therapist Dr. Rebecca Walsh. Timeline of incidents spanning 8 weeks audio recording from hospital recovery room, legally obtained. The list went on and on. Then I saw the section labeled Temporary Orders, Joint Legal Custody, Maintained, Primary Physical Custody, granted to petitioner, Owen Mercer. Respondent's visitation, supervised only pending psychological evaluation. Both parents ordered to undergo co-parenting counseling, genetic testing costs assessed to respondent for initiating reasonable doubt. Hearing scheduled for final custody determination, March 15th. I looked up from the papers, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Across the waiting room I saw them. Owen was sitting near the window. Next to him was his attorney, a woman in a dark suit with a briefcase. Judith was on his other side, holding Theo. Owen met my eyes. His expression was calm, resolved, finished. Then he turned back to his attorney and continued their quiet conversation. The pediatrician's office manager approached me. She said they needed to reschedule Theo's appointment due to the situation. She said it gently but firmly. Other parents in the waiting room were looking at me. One mother pulled her child closer. Another was whispering to her husband. I gathered my things and left, my face burning with shame. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the number on the custody petition. It was Owen's attorney. A woman answered. She said that Owen had filed for custody modification based on emotional abuse and that the temporary orders were in effect immediately. She said that I needed to arrange supervised visitation through the court-appointed monitor, that I was not to contact Owen directly, that all communication would go through the attorneys. Then she said, Ms. Mercer, I want to be clear about something. Your husband is your son's biological father. The DNA test proved that conclusively. But that doesn't erase 8 weeks of emotional torture, of allowing inappropriate comments, of creating doubt, of choosing a boundary-crossing friendship over your husband's well-being and your family's stability. The court agreed that pattern demonstrates poor judgment and potential harm to the child. She hung up. I drove directly to work. I needed to talk to Harold, to explain that the DNA test proved I'd been faithful, that everything could go back to normal now. I was so wrong. In the HR conference room, Harold and the HR director were waiting. They had copies of the custody petition on the table. Harold said that Owen's attorney had sent it as a professional courtesy regarding workplace conduct allegations. The HR director slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of Noel's social media posts where he'd joked at networking events about Theo looking like him, posts where he'd made comments about being Uncle Noel with winking emojis. She said that clients had seen these posts, that they'd made complaints, that the agency's reputation was being affected. Harold said, "The issue isn't whether you were faithful to your husband. The DNA test settles that. The issue is that you created and enabled a situation that damaged your judgment, your professionalism, and our agency's reputation." I tried to argue. I said the DNA test proved I hadn't done anything wrong. The HR director said, "The DNA test proves you didn't commit adultery. It doesn't prove you didn't commit emotional abuse. And based on this custody petition and the exhibits, the court has determined that you did." I was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I had to surrender my building access card and company laptop. Security escorted me out of the building. My colleagues watched from their desks. Some looked sympathetic, most looked away. I drove home in a fog. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a notice taped to the front door. Temporary custody order, per family court ruling. Dated today, Owen James Mercer has been granted temporary primary physical custody of Theodore Owen Mercer. Calista Mercer's visitation is supervised only, pending psychological evaluation scheduled for February 28th. Per temporary possession order, respondent must vacate marital residence to provide stable environment for minor child. Respondent may retrieve personal belongings under supervision. My bags were sitting on the porch, 2 suitcases, and a box of personal items. Through the living room window, I could see them. Owen was sitting on the couch feeding Theo a bottle. Judith was in the kitchen organizing baby supplies. They looked calm. peaceful, like a functioning family unit. I knocked on the door. Owen looked up, saw me, and looked away. He said something to his mother. Judith came to the door but didn't open it. She said through the glass, "You need to leave, Calla. The custody order is in effect. You can arrange supervised visits through your attorney." I asked to see my baby. She said, "Your baby is with his father, where he's safe and stable. You'll see him Saturday at 10 a.m. with a court-appointed supervisor." Then she closed the curtain. I sat down on the porch steps, holding the custody petition in my shaking hands. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from an attorney named Sarah Finch. I listened to it through tears. "Ms. Mercer, you need representation immediately. I've reviewed the petition. This is unusual. Your husband is your son's biological father, yet he's arguing you created doubt through inappropriate boundaries and emotional abuse. The judge granted temporary primary custody based on witness statements and a documented pattern of harmful behavior. I need to be frank with you. Regaining primary custody will be extremely difficult. The evidence shows you repeatedly enabled inappropriate comments about your baby's paternity. You laughed at jokes that made your husband question his own son. You prioritized a boundary-crossing friendship over your family's well-being. The court doesn't care that you didn't physically cheat. The court cares that you emotionally abused your husband and created an unstable environment. We need to meet immediately to discuss your very limited options." I sat on the porch until the sun went down, reading through the petition over and over again. The exhibit list was devastating. Every joke Noel made that I laughed at, documented with witness statements. Every time I defended him instead of shutting it down, recorded in text messages. Every family member who warned me, listed as witnesses. Every professional who expressed concern, included in the assessment. The hospital recovery room conversation, audio recorded with Judith and nurses as witnesses. The family lunch disaster, documented with restaurant receipt and statements from 5 family members. My own text messages calling Owen jealous, paranoid, controlling, submitted as evidence of emotional abuse. Screenshots of me telling friends that Owen was overreacting to harmless jokes, proving I understood his distress and dismissed it anyway. Professional assessment from family therapists stating, "Respondent's pattern of behavior demonstrates narcissistic disregard for spouse's emotional well-being and inability to maintain appropriate boundaries. The deliberate creation and maintenance of paternity doubt, even in absence of physical infidelity, constitutes psychological abuse and demonstrates poor judgment regarding child's best interests." And at the bottom, Owen's personal statement, "The DNA test confirms I am Theodore's biological father. I am grateful for that confirmation and for my son. But that confirmation doesn't erase 8 weeks of deliberate emotional torture. My wife knowingly allowed and encouraged her male friend to joke repeatedly about our baby looking like him. She laughed. She defended him. She brought him to family events. She refused to set boundaries when I asked. When family members asked. When even strangers expressed concern. She made me doubt my own son. She made my mother question whether her grandson was her grandson. She created an environment where I had to seek legal paternity confirmation despite being faithful in my marriage. That is emotional abuse. That is harmful to our child. That demonstrates catastrophically poor judgment. I'm not seeking custody because of infidelity. The DNA test proved there was no physical affair. I'm seeking custody because a parent who would allow this situation, who would prioritize an inappropriate friendship over her child's well-being and family stability, has demonstrated she cannot be trusted with primary custody. Theodore deserves better. He deserves a stable home where his parentage isn't a running joke, where boundaries are respected, where his father isn't subjected to ongoing emotional abuse. I love my son, I am his father, and I will protect him, even if that means protecting him from his mother's poor judgment. I read Owen's statement 5 times. Each time it hurt more. Because he was right. The DNA test proved I never cheated. I was Theo's mother and Owen was Theo's father. That was never in question biologically, but I had done something worse than cheat. I had let the doubt exist. I had laughed at it. I had enabled it. I had defended it. I had chosen Noel's feelings over Owen's pain. I had chosen being seen as cool and modern over being appropriate and respectful. I had chosen defending a boundary-crossing friendship over protecting my marriage and my family. And when everyone, Owen, Judith, Iris, Frank, strangers in grocery stores, told me it was wrong, I'd called them jealous, old-fashioned, dramatic, controlling. I had gaslit my husband for expressing reasonable concerns about inappropriate behavior. And a judge looked at all the evidence and said, "That's abuse, that's harmful, that demonstrates poor judgment," and took my baby away. I looked through the window one last time. Judith was rocking Theo to sleep in the nursery. Owen was cleaning bottles in the kitchen. They looked like a team, a family unit, a unit I was no longer part of. I loaded my bags into my car and drove to a budget hotel near the highway. I checked in using my credit card. The joint account wasn't frozen because Owen wasn't trying to punish me financially. He was just trying to protect our son. In the sterile hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the custody petition one more time. I read the most devastating line again. Respondent demonstrated pattern of emotional abuse by creating and maintaining paternity doubt despite having committed no physical infidelity. That was the cruelest irony. I had destroyed my family without ever cheating. I had lost custody of my baby despite being his biological mother. I had proven that emotional abuse matters, that boundaries matter, that you can be technically faithful while still betraying your spouse in ways that count. All it took was laughing at the wrong jokes, enabling the wrong friendship, dismissing the right concerns, and refusing to set boundaries until 8 weeks had passed, and a judge decided I didn't deserve primary custody of my own son. The man I called controlling had simply been protecting himself. The man I accused of being insecure had simply been responding to genuinely inappropriate behavior. The man I thought was overreacting had built a legal case proving that emotional abuse is still abuse, even without infidelity. And now I had supervised visits twice a week while Owen raised our son in the home we were supposed to share. Because I wouldn't stop laughing at jokes about my baby looking like another man, I lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere across town, my husband was putting our son to bed, without me. And it was no one's fault but mine. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.